Growing up in the Midwest, tornadoes have both intrigued me and haunted my dreams. I feel like tornadoes are the most lifelike, non-living phenomena in the world. Hello everybody, welcome back to another iceberg video. Today we're talking about the tornado iceberg, which is something near and dear to me because I live in an area that has some horrific tornadoes. I also just want to say that I'm not a meteorologist. I don't necessarily, know a whole lot about weather systems and that sort of thing, but I do really like tornadoes. So this is an iceberg chart with a lot of well-known stuff such as the tri-state tornado, dead man walking, tornado intercept vehicles, and then further down in this list we will be talking about some more obscure topics such as the Joplin butterfly people, the atomic tornado outbreak, and the fire tornado that took 40,000 lives. But without further ado, if you like tornadoes too, sit back, relax, and we will go ahead and get into the video. Starting at the top of this list, we have Tier 1, 70% of the world's tornadoes happen in the USA. So the United States is the only place on Earth with the geography, climate, and atmospheric dynamics that all align to create these massive storm cells that can produce tornadoes. This occurs because of the warm, moist Gulf air moving in one direction, meeting the cold, dry air from the Rockies moving in another direction, and it creates a rotation and the perfect conditions to make these storms. Dust Devil selfie. This is just a video of a guy in Australia who drives up to this dust devil and then takes this video of himself in front of it and looks like he's like outrageously close to a massive dust devil that could potentially be dangerous. But it turns out this video is actually CGI, and it was made by this company, the Woolshed company, that has actually produced a few viral videos, like 8 super viral videos, such as one where a bear is chasing a snowboarder, and these are all like fake videos that they made specifically to go viral. Next we have tornado watch versus warning. So a lot of people get these two mixed up, what a watch or a warning is dealing with tornadoes. Here is an easy way to remember it. A watch just means people are watching out for a tornado. A warning means that they are warning you about a tornado that they have seen. And so whenever, especially whenever there is a warning, you should immediately get to shelter. But there's also a rare situation where they will have a tornado emergency, and that is where there is a catastrophic tornado that is doing immense damage that has been confirmed. But at that point, you should already be in your basement because there should have been like a warning before that. Waterspouts. Basically, they're tornadoes over water. They are so crazy looking. If you've ever seen a video, sometimes they can form like multiple at the same time, and they just look like unworldly. They're just pretty trippy looking. Usually they appear pretty thin and like almost like ethereal looking. I saw this video of this guy who he sailed his boat through one, which, you should not do, but it was a small one. And there was even there was this famous situation back in 1894 where down in Australia, they were claiming there was a very large one that formed a complete loop and looped back into itself, which is really crazy. Next we have the tri-state tornado. So this is the single deadliest tornado in US history with 695 deaths. So this happened in March of 1925. It holds the record for being the single longest path length in history at 219 miles traveled by this tornado. It was on the ground for 3.5 hours, which is such a long time. And this tornado moved at highway speeds. It averaged like 60 miles per hour. It peaked at 73 miles per hour. So this thing would have been extremely hard to outrun. Because it moved so fast, this contributed to how high the death toll was. But the main reason why so many people did die from this tornado is because people had almost no time to react. What's interesting is the word tornado was actually banned in US weather forecasts at this time because officials feared that it would cause a public panic. And obviously this did not work. This was like worst case scenario. You definitely should be warning people and not just saying, oh, it's not a risk. Obviously it was a risk. And so residents received no warning at all, even though the developing storm was catastrophic. Tier 2, tornado sirens' original purpose. So I found this one really interesting. Originally, most tornado sirens that we still use today were installed right after World War II, and their original purpose primarily was to warn Americans to get to shelter in case of a Soviet nuclear attack. Isn't that crazy? It was the Cold War going on. Everybody was worried about getting hit with a nuclear bomb. So they mainly used these from the 1950s to the 1980s as a way to warn about nukes incoming. Obviously, we don't use them like that today. They're mainly used for natural disasters like tornadoes, but they also warn for other things such as dangerous weather like tsunamis, flash floods, even wildfires. And it's just interesting that, like, I feel like that kind of like helps you understand why their sound is kind of eerie. Next up, we have Joplin. Joplin was the single most catastrophic tornado in modern times, but it was the most costly in damage any tornado has ever done. It did $2.8 billion in damage. On May 22nd, 2011, an EF5 tornado struck Joplin, Missouri, carving a mile-wide path directly through the center of the city. So obviously this is why this tornado was so bad. It's because it directly carved a path through the smack center of the city while also being 1 mile wide, which is a massive tornado. This resulted in 158 deaths and injured over 1,150 people. Everything about Joplin was just like the most horribly correct circumstances had to line up for this tornado to be the way it was. It was a Sunday, it was like 5 p.m., it was sunny outside, everybody was celebrating their graduation, they had just had a big high school graduation, the sun was shining, and whenever this storm moved in, it is crazy. If you watch the videos of what it looked like, it got pitch black. It was so dark outside. This tornado intensified from being a weak EF0 to blowing up into this violent EF5 tornado in just minutes. It became a massive wedge nearly 1 mile wide as it entered Joplin, which is unusual for the escalation of even like a supercell tornado. I heard it explained that the amount of debris and rubble cleared out of Joplin after the tornado event was equivalent to about 2.5 to 3 times that of the Twin Towers collapsing on 9/11. But it was a very, very tragic and sad event. If you look at the footage like right after the tornado passed through, it is so outrageous, the amount of destruction. It looks like no man's land in World War I, but we will be talking more about Joplin later on. Tornado intercept vehicles. So storm chasers will take normal vehicles and trick them out into like these tanks or portable bunkers that they use to study tornadoes more closely. They try to make them to where they can be parked directly in front of a tornado and like withstand the winds. Specifically, they try to make like the skirt low to the ground so it doesn't get the wind underneath it and flip it over and, you know, take it up into the sky. But they try to collect high detailed scientific data about tornadoes such as temperature, humidity, pressure, wind speed, and they also get high definition videos of the vortexes. These things are really cool. This one guy made his vehicle into this absolute tank. He named it the Dominator 3. He's got this armored steel plating on it, bulletproof glass. It's supposed to be able to withstand hail up to 150 miles an hour. I also saw he did this cool thing where they had such a hard time getting probes into the tornado that he figured out if you shot these little rockets into there, you could penetrate through like this wall of ascending air and actually get in there to get the data that's more sought after. And he's had these rockets get into the tornado and get carried up to heights of like 30,000 feet and get carried over 26 miles away from where he shot it off, which is so crazy and cool. Dead man walking. So the dead man walking, as you can see in this picture, is a tornado that looks like a man with 2 legs kind of walking. And it even looks like there's almost like a scythe in this tornado, which makes it kind of look like the Grim Reaper or something similar. This is a rare phenomenon where multiple vortexes form simultaneously. The most famous picture of one of these which is this picture right here, is from the 1997 Gerald tornado, which was an EF5, or it was an F5 tornado. And this picture is just insanely eerie looking. It looks like a humanoid silhouette that just looks like impending death. This picture actually came from a TLC documentary that claimed that there was this Native American legend about if you see the dead man walking, then that's it, you're dead. You're a dead man walking, just like the tornado. Which even in this case, it does kind of seem like realistic that if you did see one of these like multiple vortex tornadoes, it is a huge threat, because there is a lot of different of the really big tornadoes that it appears as these multiple vortexes, and then they instantly blow up into these massive F5 tornadoes that are extremely deadly. Even like what I just talked about, the Joplin tornado, right before it became a monster EF5, there is a picture of it having multiple vortexes, so it may have been a dead man walking as well. And also, like the famous 2013 El Reno tornado had multiple vortexes too. We'll talk about that one more later. Tornado paths seen from space. So this is just referring to the fact that you can see damage from tornadoes on Google Earth still today from tornadoes that have happened like a long time ago. Even like I just said, the Joplin tornado, you can still see the damage from it from 2011. And it's, you know, it's 2026. It's over 15 years later. It is crazy. If you go to Joplin back in like 2007, which is like 4 years before it hit, you can see how big the trees are if you go into street view. And then if you go right after it hit in 2012, all these trees and like all these full neighborhoods with nice houses are just completely gone. All the trees are gone. It is so crazy the level of destruction that you still see today. And like I said, from space you can see these lines where these tornadoes went through. Joplin is the best example, just a massive scar. Alright, moving on to tier 3. We have the Teton Yellowstone tornado. This tornado is so weird because of where it took place mainly. In July 1987, a powerful tornado formed at a very high altitude, which is extremely rare. This tornado formed and then crossed over the continental divide, which if you don't know what that is the area where water runs from one side to the other side. Like water will either go to the Atlantic Ocean or to the Pacific Ocean. And so, you know, there's always been this rumor that, you know, tornadoes will not cross over hills or over mountains, but in this case, it crossed over the continental divide, which is insane. It crossed over a 10,000 foot mountain, and this tornado was very large. It was an F4, the largest ever formed in Wyoming. Moving on, we have Canada's only real tornado. So this is Canada's only F5 tornado ever. It took place in the town of Ely in Manitoba back in 2007. So it struck this town and it formed from a rope to a cone structure. It was part of a small 2-day tornado outbreak. And what's good about this tornado is while several houses were leveled, no one was injured or killed. But if you watch the videos of this tornado, it kind of took a really weird path, and at one point an entire house is basically sucked into this tornado, which is just really crazy to see. Next up we have Roundabouts cause tornadoes. So this is talking about this guy who called into this news station in Scranton, Pennsylvania, office reference. And this news station was allowing people to call them and leave voice messages about their opinions on events that are going on within the town. And there had been like a couple tornadoes in that area kind of recently. One listener called into the news station and was claiming that they had recently put in roundabouts, and because of like the motion of all the cars going around these circles, he thinks it's disturbing the atmosphere and causing tornaders, as he called them.
We didn't have tornadoes here until we started putting into traffic circles. Because on the count of, you want to know why? That when people go round and round in circles, it causes disturbance in the atmosphere and causes tornadoes.
I'm sure this guy was joking. I'm sure no one actually thinks that tornadoes are caused by roundabouts. But you know what? Maybe he might be onto something. Sometimes the biggest discoveries come from the smallest people. smallest brains. And if you don't think about it, it makes sense. Moving on down, we have ghost tornado. So sometimes tornadoes can be nearly invisible. This happens because we can't see them due to not enough condensation making the funnel visible. So these things are causing havoc on the ground, and the wind circulation exists and it's touching the ground causing damage, but it's nearly invisible from not too far away. This happens specifically whenever it's really dry and the humidity is too low, but most of the time you'll see like a spin up and dust and debris and stuff, and you'll notice like the wall cloud before. So EF6. So the EF scale measures how strong a tornado is based on not how strong the wind is or not how big the tornado is, but rather based on how much damage the tornado leaves behind. Here is a pretty good graphic for it, even though it seems like it's trying to base it off wind. The expected damage is what classifies the tornado as being higher or lower on this scale. Normally though, whenever it's like an EF5, you're getting over 200 mile per hour winds, which is outrageous. Tier 4, tornadoes in space. So this is referring to how other planets in our solar system have tornado-like things, like tornado-like vortexes. Keep in mind, the strongest tornado on Earth was possibly about 320 mile per hour wind speed, but there are some massive tornado-like things on other planets. Jupiter has, that great red spot, which is, visible from telescopes and such. That red spot is 1,000 miles across, has been raging for centuries, which is crazy, and it has wind speeds of up to 420 miles per hour. The planet Mars gets dust devils, which is kind of cool. Saturn has, its North Pole hexagram, which if you know, that is 20,000 miles across, and it will have jet streams in this pattern that can reach up to 340 miles per hour. But by far, the fastest wind speed in the solar system is 1,500 miles per hour on Neptune. It sometimes has these massive dark vortices that are similar to hurricanes, but far larger and far more violent. And it's just crazy to think about like extreme weather on other planets. It's really cool. The 2011 Super Outbreak. So this was the largest tornado outbreak ever recorded, where in the span of only 4 days, there was over 360 tornadoes that impacted the South and Midwest region here in the US. There were 4 EF5 tornadoes during this time, which is so outrageous because sometimes we'll go like 10 years or something without having any EF5s. So it's crazy. In 4 days, we had 4 EF5s. More than 320 people died during this outbreak. From this graph here, you can see how condensed they were in some specific areas. There was over 238 deaths in Alabama alone, which kind of makes sense because Alabama got massively hit by this outbreak. Some of the most notable tornadoes during this was the Hackleburg Phil Campbell tornado, which was an EF5, and the Philadelphia, Mississippi tornado. And keep in mind, this 2011 outbreak was just 1 month before the horrific Joplin tornado, which is actually not included in this outbreak, it's crazy. That was like a crazy year for insane weather. Moving on to tornado seeding. So I'm sure you've heard of like cloud seeding, which is like a very real thing. This is whenever planes will basically inject salt and a few other ingredients like silver, dry ice into the clouds so that the water droplets in these clouds will get really heavy so that they'll fall to the ground. And this will increase rainfall at least slightly. However, people kind of get conspiratorial about all this and they think there is like much larger scale weather manipulation, and some people even think that it's possible to seed tornadoes. But if you look into it, I don't think you can seed a supercell. You really can't seed the kind of rotation that you would need to develop a tornado. It would just take way too much energy. I heard one person explain that the amount of energy you would need would be like positioning multiple nuclear bombs all in the perfect positions to blow up and create a extreme atmospheric event that it would need to make these tornadoes, if even it's possible at all. Next up, we have the largest tornado ever. So the 2013 El Reno tornado that happened in El Reno, Oklahoma was so outrageously large it almost doesn't make any sense. It was the single largest tornado ever that we know of anywhere on the planet. It started off as being still really big. It was 1 mile wide, which is huge, and it blew up from being 1 mile wide to being about 2.5 miles wide in only 30 seconds. Imagine trying to get away from something that is 2.5 miles wide. Oh my gosh. This is actually the first incident where professional storm chasers actually were directly killed from a tornado. Now, although this tornado was absolutely massive, there was only a total of 8 fatalities, which is still sad. Wind speeds in this tornado likely exceeded 300 miles per hour, and still it was only classified as an EF3 because, like I said before, the EF scale is based on the amount of damage, not the size of the tornado. Anyways, this tornado hit relatively few structures, and we should be very thankful that is the case, because if this thing were to have hit a town at all, the level of damage would have been catastrophic. UFO Tornado Energy. So this is referring to how some people think that UFOs might use tornadoes as energy to power their crafts. I heard this really funny conspiracy about how some people think that whenever volcanoes are erupting, they will sometimes see UFOs, and that maybe that's because these UFOs go to these volcanoes and either use them as a power source to power their ship, or as kind of like a portal to like travel through for some reason. I don't really know. It's like I don't really know where that conspiracy thing came from. But anyways, Gary England, who is a meteorologist, he's like one of the most famous meteorologists and weathermen of all time. He was covering this tornado in 1999 called the Bridge Creek Moore tornado. Very famous. It was an F5 tornado that hit southwest Oklahoma and went from Bridge Creek all the way to the town of Moore. It was extremely powerful. Anyways, during this tornado, Gary England was broadcasting, and this helicopter picked up what looked like a cylindrical tube flying through the sky. I feel like it was kind of blown out of proportion because it was just kind of a flash across the camera lens for just a second. Like it maybe was right in front of the lens, not like way off in the sky like some people think, like it was like a real UFO. And this got a lot of attention, and like the History Channel did this thing about it on their show Monster Quest. They had Gary England on their show where, you know, he said, yeah, there was a cylindrical tube caught on camera, and he thought it was weird too, but I don't really think he thought it was a UFO. It could have just been a bug going across the lens, or even like a bird. But, you know, some people are saying, you know, aliens use tornadoes to power their ships, which is totally reasonable to think, in my opinion. Tier 5, EF5 Sonic Booms. So there was this kind of widespread rumor about the Smithfield EF5 tornado in 2011, about how people were hearing sonic booms while it was going on. Many people reported hearing something that sounded like an object breaking the sound barrier coming directly from the tornado, maybe because of how fast it was moving. Technically speaking, tornadoes have winds of about 300 miles per hour, about at the fastest. In order for a piece of debris to create a sonic boom, it would have to be tossed by the wind at over 600 miles an hour at least. And it just seems kind of unlikely for something like this to actually have happened. Like, imagine if we were seeing something in the natural world breaking the sound barrier like this. That would actually be so cool. I heard some people talking about it's not likely, but technically it's not impossible if the sub-vortex inside the tornado exploded. I don't understand exactly what that means, but meteorologists say that it's much more likely people were hearing bangs from debris and stuff breaking, or even like there was lightning inside of the vortex that you couldn't see from the outside. That's one theory. 1923 fire tornado, 40,000 lives. So this was an unusually violent natural disaster that happened in Japan back in 1923, also called the Great Japan Earthquake of 1923 or the Great Kanto Earthquake. This was a 7.9 magnitude earthquake that hit around lunchtime. Because it hit during lunchtime, a lot of people were cooking, and this immediately started fires all throughout the city of Tokyo, as a lot of them had wooden buildings at this time. Because of all these fires, tens of thousands of residents there fled into this military clothing depot for safety. And because there was also a typhoon at this same time in Tokyo, it fanned the flames and intensified the fire until it created a fire tornado, which then directly hit this depot building that had tens of thousands of people in it. And there was a rotating column of superheated flame with over 100-mile-an-hour winds. And yeah, basically a fire tornado hit the building full of people and trapped them inside. And within 15 minutes, this vortex obliterated the entire crowd of people, where 36 to 40,000 people died almost instantly. And it is by far the deadliest fire tornado ever recorded. The heat of this fire tornado was so intense that metal objects melted and human remains were reduced to ash in just minutes. I like to think about how a lot of these people probably did not burn to death, but rather died of asphyxiation or lack of air, as this vortex was probably so large that it sucked in all the oxygen to feed the flames, and so they just suffocated, which is nicer than the other option. But this event was just so crazy. And then like the events that followed were even crazier. And anyways, single most deadly fire tornado ever. So insane. Great. More bugs in my walls. Trying to get out. Typical Wednesday for you. Alright, next up we have the Joplin fungal infection. So following the 2011 Joplin tornado, there was this rare aggressive fungal infection that infected 13 people, and it was just such a weird situation because this was like the largest outbreak of this type of weird fungus called mucormycosis ever recorded. This is like something that people don't normally have to deal with. It is a soil-dwelling fungus that normally wouldn't be a problem, but it was forced into people from traumatic wounds from debris from the tornado's winds. It was basically a flesh-eating infection, and victims needed aggressive surgery to cut away the infected tissue and specialized antifungal stuff, and it led to a high mortality rate where 5 of the 13 people infected died. Tornado alley shifting east. So there is scientific data that the consensus is Tornado Alley has been shifting eastward at least over the past several decades, and originally they thought this would be kind of more of a temporary thing, but now they're realizing that it might be more permanent than they had thought. Multiple studies have shown that tornado activity has been decreasing in the traditional areas like the Plains Corridor, which is Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and it is increasing across the Midwest, Mid-South, and Southeast area, especially in areas like Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Arkansas, Illinois, and Southeast Missouri. And they think the reason why this is happening is because this warmer, moist air from the Gulf is moving further east than it normally does. And there's also more cold season tornadoes, which kind of causes this as well. And this is great for me because I am directly in that area that is getting affected more by tornadoes, and we are definitely seeing it. It's kind of crazy. Like, I think even in just a couple days, we're supposed to be getting hit with some bad weather as well. Last year, actually, on the map, it showed that a tornado went like directly over my house, but I don't think it actually was a tornado because I don't think it was on the ground. So it was just like a tornado debris signature. That's what it's called. Next up, we have the Blackwell Supernatural. So this is probably the weirdest tornado event of all time throughout history. So in the dark of night in May 1955, there was not one, but 2 F5 tornadoes that struck central Oklahoma. One of them is now known as the Blackwell Supernatural tornado. This tornado was so weird because people that saw it claim that it glowed. It made a straight line through the town of Blackwell where a lot of people saw it. It was a large wedge tornado that apparently not only just had a constant glow to it, but also had these balls of blue glowing lights circulating it. Many different eyewitnesses described it as looking like a 4th of July pinwheel. Some said the light was the same color as an arc welder, but much brighter, which kind of points to it being some sort of like ball lightning. Others said it was like towards the top of the funnel, but there's a lot of different speculations on what it could be. I'm sure many of you that are watching this video have heard of ball lightning, which is a rare, unexplained phenomenon that seems like this ball of light that just kind of floats above the ground sometimes, and it just hovers for several seconds, like during a thunderstorm or after a lightning strike. And actually, reports of ball lightning have existed since the 12th century, and so some people think that for some reason this tornado spawned these plasma balls of lightning that circled it, or maybe it was just a UFO getting its energy so it can go off world or get to the Saturn hexagram. But anyways, yeah, apparently a lot of people saw this, and honestly, Freaknado. Tier 6, Atomic Tornado Outbreak. So this is a really cool thing that I just learned about. Back during when the atomic age was going on and we were doing all kinds of nuclear tests, about 30% of the population here in the United States believed that the nuclear tests that they were doing out west in Nevada were causing extreme weather in other parts of the country and like making tornadoes happen in areas where they should not have been happening. And honestly, it's kind of reasonable because there was this weird series of tornadoes back in 1953, which, keep in mind, there was 11 nuclear tests in Nevada in the year of 1953. But it was very strange. These tornadoes hit way outside of Tornado Alley, most notably in Flint, Michigan, and in Worcester, Massachusetts, which resulted in 251 deaths, being some of the most deadly tornadoes in history. However, meteorologists say that it's not really possible that these nuclear tests caused these tornadoes to happen in other areas, but in the year of 1953, there was 5 F5 tornadoes in America, which is nuts. Deadliest tornado in the world. So this is a really strange one that surprised me. The deadliest tornado in history, in the world, was not in the US, but rather it was in Bangladesh, which, if you don't know, is a country just east of India. This happened in April of 1989. It was called the Dalatpur Sataria tornado, where entire villages were wiped off of the map. This tornado is not well documented like most modern tornadoes. It was likely classified as an F5, although it was not officially ever rated, but they think it was a wedge-shaped tornado that was about 1 mile wide and had winds over 250 miles per hour. And to this day, no tornado has ever caused so many injuries and so many deaths. The death toll was over 1,300 people, which is insane. There was 12,000 injuries, and this event left 80,000 people homeless. The reason why this death toll was so high is because the buildings there were not built well, very poor construction. There was extremely high population density in this area, along with no warning systems, so nobody knew it was going to happen. Probably a lot of them didn't know what to do if it did happen. I almost guarantee you there's almost no basements in this area. And then also after this event, there's very little medical emergency response. So just a lot of bad things kind of all lining up to create such a massive death toll. And I feel like, you never hear about tornadoes outside of the United States, but there is kind of like a tornado alley in this India Bangladesh area because of, similar weather factors like we have in the US with the dry cold air mixing with the warm moist air. They have pretty much the same things. Next up, we have living tornado creatures. All right, imagine living in America back like 200-300 years ago when, you don't understand weather systems and you're constantly just getting terrorized by these huge things that don't make any sense, and they're super loud and scary, and they look like living creatures. What are you going to think they are? You're going to think they're monsters. I mean, really, have you ever seen anything in nature look so similar to a living creature but not be? I was watching this one video of this tornado form, I think up in Iowa or somewhere similar. It looked so lifelike. The way it slithered and moved through the sky and it kind of danced and changed shape. Anyways, people in the past thought the exact same way. Native American mythology talked about tornadoes being these living beings, such as the cyclone person and a whirlwind woman, and they kind of saw these things as living beings that were personified as evil spirits. Some would even argue that the famous Thunderbird, which is, the fiery bird that causes lightning and storms, could maybe be a personification of a tornado. There's even an account back in 1165 where there was this really severe thunderstorm in Yorkshire, England, and apparently there was multiple vortexes that formed, so it looked like the legs of some sort of creature. And whenever people were describing this thing, they said it appeared like a black monster with kind of horse-like legs that looked like it walked along the ground and destroyed everything in its path, describing it as a giant black horse called the accursed horse. And even today, in modern times, people make up stories about SCPs that look like tornadoes, and I think those are really, really cool. Alright, getting close to the bottom, we have the rolling fork lights. So this was an event that appeared like there were car headlights from a vehicle that were floating around in the sky during the Rolling Fork, Mississippi EF5 tornado in 2023. Multiple storm chasers and multiple cameras observed these lights, and it very likely was a vehicle, which is really scary. It appears like it was suspended in the air, orbiting around this tornado kind of on the outside at the height of roughly 420 feet high. It still is kind of a big mystery, as they don't really know of any specific vehicle that was lifted up into the air like this. But the vehicle would have had to be on, or its lights would have had to be on. But in the video, you can pretty clearly see these two individual lights that almost would have had to have been a vehicle to be that bright and to cut through the tornado and, shine to where the camera could see it from so far away. Mathematically speaking, meteorologists say that it's even plausible for a vehicle the size of, an F-150 truck to be lofted up into the air by a low-end EF5 tornado, but this was like a high-end EF5 tornado, and it's estimated the winds would have had to be over 175 miles per hour in order to hold this vehicle up into the air. So it's entirely possible it was a vehicle, but it's still inconclusive. But it is so eerie to consider that it is possible for a vehicle that could have people in it. In this case, I don't think there were people in it, to be hundreds of feet up in the air, 400 feet in the air, because I used to always think that you were safe if you were in your vehicle, mostly you're safe from these tornadoes. It's really not the case, but it's just, scary to think about. All right, last on this list, we have the Joplin butterfly people. So this was a legend that arose in the midst of the 2011 EF5 Joplin tornado that we have talked about a lot in this video. This rumor started almost immediately after the tornado had gone directly through the town of Joplin, taking the lives of 158 people and terrorizing thousands of people. Children that survived this horrific event made drawings of these people that they claim they saw that had butterfly wings, and sometimes they drew them as looking much more angelic looking like some sort of actual angel figure. And some of these children explained that during the chaos of these tornadoes, various different children claim they saw these butterfly people appear and like take people and help them survive during the chaos of these tornadoes. They claimed that they would lift people in the air or shield people from debris, keep buildings from being torn apart. And there's like a few theories on, what was going on here. Some people think these were like actual angelic beings or like guardian angels that actually protected people in this town, and maybe only children can see them for some reason. There's kind of a darker theory that these children actually saw people that were, thrown through the sky during this event. And there is another theory that this is just kind of like mass hysteria and kind of like a way to cope with this traumatic event of such an outrageous disaster that changed so many lives. I just cannot imagine what it would be like to go through one of these events. I've seen a lot of this footage while doing research for this video, but I'm sure that doesn't do justice for like the event that actually happened. But even today, Joplin has a lot of like butterfly symbolism throughout the town, and it seems like the butterfly has kind of become the mascot of the town after such an outrageous event. But yeah, that concludes the Tornado Iceberg. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope I did this video respectfully enough. But yeah, tornadoes they're very interesting, and obviously they're very scary. I definitely, after doing this video, I'm going to treat them with a lot more caution than I have before, because, the survivability of a tornado, if you have a basement, is outrageously high. It's like 99%. And so that's one thing I want you guys to keep in mind, is that if you hear a tornado warning, try to get to a basement. I know it's not always easy, but maybe consider getting some sort of tornado shelter. But that's not my message for this video. My message is just, kind of be cautious, love your neighbors, help them out, because people need help now and then, and especially in events like this, we should be helping each other, because that's what it's all about. But thank you guys so much for watching. I'm so sorry that my voice sounds awful. I've been sick for like the past week, but we got through it, and my voice got okay enough to do this video, and you are a deranged viewer for watching to the end of this video, and I salute you for that. If you want to join a great group where we talk about a lot of stuff kind of similar to this and other nonsense, then I have an Instagram group that we do more stuff in. I do polls in there and like ask what you want to hear on the next icebergs and that sort of thing. But that's on my Instagram right there. Thank you guys for watching. Stay safe this tornado season. It is just kicking off with this video. This is like the beginning of peak tornado season as of like right now, as of today. Stay deranged, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.